All right, folks, today let's talk about the accessory organs for the skin, okay? So far we've looked at the different layers of skin, the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermic region. Today, for a few minutes, we want to look at the accessory organs, those things that help the skin do its job, okay? And we've already talked about some of these things like your hair follicles, your sweat glands, your sebaceous glands, things like that. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail as far as what they do for us, okay? So obviously the first thing is your hair follicles. Now, the thing about hair follicles is you will find them pretty much everywhere on the body, okay? But hair follicles are extremely important. I know we don't really think about hair being super important, and we just think about it being something that covers our head or covers our body in certain areas, but it does a lot of things for us, okay? Again, the only place you really won't find hair is on the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet, okay? But again, the hairs are pretty much everywhere else, okay? So individual hairs develop from cells at the base of the hair follicle, okay? The skin, the epidermis, folds down. That's what that word invaginates means. It folds down into the dermal layer, and at the bottom of it, just like we have simple stratified squamous epithelium making the top of your skin, that's what's happening here at the bottom of your hair follicle. The living portion of that is growing out of that little dip into the skin, okay? And again, when they get old, they get pushed forward and they get pushed up, and new ones form up underneath it. And slowly but surely, those cells get pushed up and outside of the body, and you see hairs forming outside of the body, okay? And again, they become keratinized. Remember, that's that word it says. It's that protein that we add to the hair follicles and the skin that makes it waterproof and stronger. So your hair is basically the same thing as your skin. A stratified squamous epithelium that has been hardened by keratin, by adding keratin to it, okay? And that's what's forming the hair shaft, the part like here on my beard, or on your arms or legs or your head. And that's the dead portion of your hair, okay? But it's just basically stratified squamous epithelium, okay? So again, you can see there is the epidermal layer, and see how it goes down into the dermal layer. And this little area right here, this part of the hair follicle is the living portion. This is where the living cells are. And as they get older, they get pushed slowly up to the front, they get flattened, they die off, and then they harden. And before you know it, they come out your head, and now you have hair sticking up, okay? So again, that's what a hair follicle is. And again, pretty much everywhere except for the palms of your feet, palms of your hands, and the soles of your feet, okay? Now, each one of these hair follicles has a group of muscle cells attached to them. They're called erector pili muscles, okay? They're muscles that, are made of smooth muscles. So they're not cardiac muscle, obviously. They're not skeletal muscle because they're not attached to any bones. They're actually attached to the underlying skin, okay? These are the ones that are going to cause you to have goosebumps or chill bumps. When you get cold, you ever had that happen where the hairs stand up and you get those little bumps up? There's a reason for that. You want those hairs, when you get cold, to stand up so that they can actually create a layer of non-moving warm air over your skin. So that kind of keeps you, hopefully, keeps you warmer, okay? That's why you have goosebumps, to keep you a little bit warmer. And again, does it work super well? It depends on how much hair you got, right? For an animal like your dog or cat, it works really well. For you and I, it helps a little bit, but not a whole lot, okay? Now, your hair color. Again, the main thing that causes hair color is, again, melanin, right? Melanin is what creates the skin color. But in your hair, the more melanin you have, the darker your hair is. So people who have blonde hair have little melanin in their skin cells, in the hair follicles. If you've got a lot of melanin, you're going to be darker haired person. Except for those of you guys, like we know a couple of them in this classroom, that have red hair. Although it's not technically red, it's more orange, but you get the idea. Those who are what we call redheaded, they have another pigment. It's called trichocydin. Trichocydin is the pigment that allows your skin and your hair color to be that redheaded hair color and that redheaded skin. You know what I'm talking about? Where they're kind of pale but freckly kind of stuff going on there. That's what causes that. Okay? So when you see someone who's redheaded, they don't have as much melanin as we do, but they have another type of pigment called Accessory. Okay? Now, we also have sebaceous glands. Big fancy word, sebaceous. Oil glands. Okay? They secrete sebum. That's another big fancy word for oil. Okay? Super easy, right? Sebum, sebaceous, oil glands. Okay? And again, we need oil glands. Now, some of us don't like oil, especially in our hair, because it makes your hair, quote unquote, greasy, right? Well, that's part of it. It helps keep your hair moisturized, right, and waterproof. And you all know this because every one of you has probably done this. If you've ever tried to wash your hair with just water, doesn't do much, does it? It just looks greasier when you get done. That's because, again, water is not going to wash oil away very well. And you have that oil to moisturize and to, again, waterproof your hair. Makes sense, okay? And they're located around the hair shafts. That's where you'll really find them. Because, again, that's the whole purpose. All right? Nails. We all have fingernails and toenails. Now, the whole purpose of fingernails and toenails is real simple. It protects your tips of your fingers and your toes. If you've ever had a fingernail or a toenail torn off, you know it's really sensitive, right? Been there, done that. It's not fun because it takes a while for that toenail to grow back. But the top of that toe or the top of that finger is really sensitive until that fingernail starts to harden. And again, that's the whole purpose, is to keep the tips of your fingers tough, right? Keep them stronger. Now, those fingernails are also, again, very useful for a lot of other things. We know we can use them to pick stuff and grab a hold of stuff, and you know, they do, and obviously for women, they like to paint them, right? But they're located on your fingers and toes, again, for protection. Okay. Now, the nails are the same thing as your skin. It's stratified squamous epithelium that has been keratinized. And it's really, really, really thick. It's just super thick. Kind of like a super thick callus on your hand, right? But this is even thicker and stronger. That's what your fingernails are made of. Now, the area where the fingernail is actually living, y'all seen this little spot right here at the bottom of your fingernails, right there? That little white thing that kind of looks like a quarter moon, a crescent moon? That thing is called the lunula. Wonder why it's called the lunula. Lunula, lunar, crescent moon shape. That's why they name these things. Remember, we got all these big fancy names that a lot of us go like, how did they come up with that? This one's easy because they named it the lunula because it looks like a crescent moon. Lunar. Okay. This is the growing region of your nail root. This right here is obviously dead cells. You get further back in here, this is where the cells are growing and dividing to make your fingernails or your toenails, same thing. Okay? So that's your fingernails and toenails. Those are also accessory organs. Again, same thing. As they get pushed out, they become keratinized and they become much harder. And again, if you've ever had a fingernail or a toenail torn off, you know this because that skin is soft. But over time, it starts to harden up and thicken, and eventually, before you know it, you got a fingernail there, or you got a toenail back. Okay. All right, what else? Sweat glands. We have wonderful things called sweat glands. Sweat glands are there for a reason as well. We may not like that reason sometimes because it makes us smell funky, nasty, gross, or, you know, it makes us feel really gooey after we have sweating, but they are necessary. Their actual names is called sudoriferous glands. And the easy way to remember sudoriferous, kind of remember the word odor. Sweat glands, odorous. Okay? That's an easy way to remember it. There's basically two types of sudoriferous, eccrine glands or apocrine sweat glands. Now the eccrine glands, they're the ones that when you're hot and running around and you just start pouring sweat, they're the ones that are kicked in. They're the ones that respond to body temperature when you get too hot. Okay? The apocrine glands also do the same thing. They respond to body temperature, but they also respond to stress and sexual arousal. What does that mean? Well, if you've ever been nervous, like you have a meeting or something you got to go to and you're really nervous about it, you ever see people their hands start to sweat and their palms sweat and they just start sweat and it's not hot anywhere and they're just, dude, you're sweating. Isn't it cold to you? Yes, but I'm still nervous. That's what happens a lot of times with these apocrine sweat glands. It's because of stress, strain, or whatever, you start to sweat, even though your body temperature is not higher than normal. Okay? So sweat glands we need, again, to regulate our body temperature. Okay? We have other glands called ceruminous glands. Ceruminous glands produce wax in your ear canal. Okay? Makes sense. These are modified, as gross as it sounds, right? These are modified sweat glands. Instead of producing sweat, they're secreting wax. And again, we need wax in our ears to catch all the little crud that flies through the air and goes into our ear canal so that it doesn't cause inflammation and infections inside of our ear. That's why we have wax being created in our ears, and that's why we need it. And another type of sweat gland that's modified is mammary glands. Mammary glands are modified sweat glands. That sounds kind of gross, but that's what it is. Because mammary glands are going to secrete milk. They don't secrete sweat, they secrete milk. So when you think about mammary glands, think of milk as being modified sweat. Kind of gross. Anybody want any chocolate flavored sweat? I don't think so. Or strawberry flavored sweat, right? This sounds gross to say that. But it is a modified sweat gland. Okay? Now, let's real quick, last thing, I want to talk about how we regulate our body temperatures. Okay? You already know this. If we don't maintain an average temperature of around 98.6, if we go up by 4 or 5 degrees and we go down by 4 or 5 degrees, our bodies are in trouble, especially if we go up by 4 or 5 degrees. That's not a good thing for what you want to do. So the body is constantly trying to maintain, remember that word homeostasis? Trying to maintain homeostasis. We want it here. We don't want it too hot. We don't want it too cold. We want it just right. Okay? So let's talk about the maintenance of your body temperature. Okay? Without it, all the metabolic functions that we need in our bodies won't work properly. That's a bad thing. Okay? That's a really bad thing. So we have to make sure that our body temperature is at the proper level most of the time, so that all those reactions that we need to take place in our body take place in our body. Because if our body temperature gets too hot, that's it. If our body temperature drops too low, a lot of these reactions won't occur either. Okay? So we have to maintain that average body temperature. Now, your skin is the big guy maintaining that, obviously. Your hypothalamus helps. We'll get to that if we get to the idea of talking about endocrine system. We'll get in much greater detail about that, okay? But anyway, the hypothalamus helps control that. So here's the thing. Your heart, your skeletal muscle produce heat. Don't believe me? Go outside when it's 20 degrees in t-shirt and shorts, start running around. You're going to start to sweat. Those muscles create heat. And it doesn't take very long, does it? Okay? So those cells in your heart and your skeletal muscle are going to produce a lot of heat. Well, how do you solve that problem? Well, you radiate heat, don't you? Your skin is a radiation thing. Remember that when somebody gets hot, we talked about this with skin color, they tend to turn real red. You know, the dermal blood vessels open up and they turn red looking. Well, this is what's happening here. The body opens up the blood vessels and your skin turns red, but all that warm blood is getting towards the surface of your skin and it's radiating that heat off of it. And of course, most of your body heat is actually lost through your top of your head, because we all know that heat rises, right? So your top of your head is where a lot of your body heat is released. Don't believe me? Go look at some of those football games where it's cold out and the guys have been sweating. They take their helmets off and they're steaming off the top of their heads, right? So again, that's the thing. Our body heat is lost through radiation, which is a good thing. Because here, we get too hot, we'll start to sweat, right? Those blood vessels will open up even more and we'll start to sweat. However, if we get too cold, those blood vessels do the exact opposite. Instead of opening up and letting more blood to the skin, we shrink them and let less blood to the skin so we can maintain the heat in the core of our body. Okay? And that allows us to hopefully maintain our body temperature. In worst case scenario, we may even start to shiver, which is another response to trying to increase the body heat. Okay? Now, again, I hope that this was helpful for you. Look at your notes. I've already sent you the notes on Google Class, or on Class Dojo, excuse me. I can send them again through your email, but I will be sending you an email Look for this video either through YouTube or through Class Dojo later today, okay? Y'all be safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.